Welcome to the P1 podcast, a experiment Platform One is taking on so that we can try to do a public retrospective to share with the community the good and the bad we learned from the beginning and the origin story and the growth of Platform One.
There's a lot we've learned over time, a lot of different places where we failed, but learned from those failures and we're ultimately able to drive some success. But also want to be able to share those lessons learned collaboratively and engage with you guys in some of your problem sets.
And hopefully it's also a jumping off point for a continued conversation as we know the ecosystem around us from a policy and programs and weapon system perspective is always changing. And we hope we're creating a space for the community to come together and have open conversation about what's going on and where we're trying to take things. But before we get too far, I want to introduce ourselves as a host. I'm Austen, Bryan, one of the government founders of Platform One, alongside another amazing team as we did so. I'll be one of the hosts, facilitate some conversation.
And I'm Belk. I'm one of the contractors that works on the programs alongside of 200 or so other wonderful contractors that have helped turn this idea into reality, this thing we kind of willed into existence. I've held multiple different roles at Platform One since its inception, most notably potentially kind of an agile coaching kind of role, but really passionate about this concept of DoD delivering valuable software to warfighters. Kind of, as Austen alluded to, a little bit of teaser of what's to come over the next few episodes is what we wanted to highlight.
We're going to go through a couple interesting things that Drew and I have come up with that we think are really going to help drive the community forward and maybe share some laughs and maybe even some tears with us. The first will be the genesis story of kind of how this band of rebels found each other and tell it from multiple perspectives, from the contractor team, the government team, our users, our stakeholders, and really get their perspective so you get a full 360 of what both was happening internally and what people perceive to be happening externally.
And in some of our episodes, we're going to touch on the culture and how we really organize to do DevOps and DevSecOps effectively. What does that mean? How do we organize our teams? How do we talk to each other? How is it maybe different than what you have seen before, or different in the way that you're operating into now? And how do we make that transition? Also, how do we scale that concept and that philosophy as the organization grows, as we get more traction and more users? What does that look like?
And then we're going to hit on one of my personally favorite topics that I've learned to loathe a little bit over the last 3 years. And that's how you make acquisitions not suck. Put another way, how do you frame contracts and funding that enable true agility for changing requirements and changing software delivery as the war and the teams change? And we had a lot of learning experiences. The more I learned about this organization, the more I learned that if you don't set things up correctly on the business side to enable the product delivery, then you're really hamstrung in what you can actually deliver.
Next, we'll dive into a little bit of, we know we're not perfect, but that doesn't mean that we can't try to get better every day. So we'll talk through a lot of our biggest failures, some of our lessons learned, some of the things we wish we knew when we were starting, or things we might have changed if we could go back with 2.5 years of experience, more if you bring in everybody's collective experience from everything they've learned throughout their careers as well, so that if you're starting your journey, maybe you're in a healthier spot with some additional context from what we've learned.
And then we're going to talk about maybe what is the episode I'm most excited to be a part of, which is bring in a panel of users and end users that have been using software delivered on our platform to talk about their perspective in working with us, both from a developer perspective and also an end user perspective of using those applications. And I think my guess is you'll hear a lot of complaints. I think there's a lot of advocacy and people that know this is the way of the future and it's better, but by no means were we perfect. And we still have a lot of areas that we're striving to be better at.
Yeah, and post engaging with some of our users, we're going to have a community panel as well. We're not the only people in this space in the DoD who are trying to make the world a better place. So we want to bring in some friends and maybe some foes, or some people who have strong opinions about our strong opinions, to drive some of that healthy conversation. Because at the end of the day, breaking down silos and getting everybody to collaborate is really one of our major goals.
And then finally, we'll kind of end the first season of the P1 podcast with some discussion of what the future holds. I think Platform One went through what I would consider a hyper scaling period where we really had to look internally about what we wanted to be and why we wanted to be it and our place in the ecosystem and how we were going to manage our agile processes. And as the landscape around us continues to change and formalize a lot of the DevOps movement, Platform One, I think, plays a unique role in that ecosystem. And you're going to hear from the current and new leadership of Platform One about where Platform One is heading in the future.
Yeah, and throughout this season, these first 8-10 episodes, we're going to bring in multiple different guests who had different perspectives on this entire thing while it was happening, with the intent of getting 360-degree perspectives, right? So some of the founding members, team members we brought in along the way, some of our end users, peers, stakeholders, like we talked about with some of those community panels, because every piece of that is what drove success in our organization. Everybody feeling like part of the team, delivering the value. And so we want all of those voices to be heard.
And then lastly, I just want to hit on the intent one more time. The last thing this podcast is about us individually, or the people that had anything to do with Platform One, but more the ideals and values in which Platform One was created and where we want to see the DoD software ecosystem go in the name of better delivery to the warfighter. And hopefully that comes through in kind of the culture and values and people that will share lessons along the learn throughout the season. But I think the biggest thing is there's just far too many challenges and far too few people to accomplish everything we want to as a community. And so we really want to create a space for collaboration and ongoing discussion. And I hope that debate and discussion is only spurred even further by the podcast. So Drew and I both hope you enjoy the content coming up this season.